Heyo! Welcome to the Industry Idiots podcast. Turns out you're listening to last week's episode. You can listen to today's episode if you head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/industryidiots. For supporting, you'll get it a week early and access to one Patreon-exclusive episode each month. Next one is coming up soon. Either way, thank you and enjoy this episode. Bye!
And with that, hello to the next episode of the Industry Idiots, your gaming chill session.
Hey.
And Sam is making some dance moves.
Oh, man. Before we start, I wanted to say, before we start talking to each other, Sven, I want to say something to the audience, whoever is listening. Thank you for making us part of your weekly routine. It's very cool.
That's a nice thing to say.
Yeah. We got a few comments, got a few reviews, and it's nice to see stuff. With that, we will also shout out the first person who has sent us their favorite game, which is Nicolas Klein. Shout out to Nico. His favorite game is Bioshock. All right.
Ooh, Bioshock. That's a fucking great pick.
Well, Bioshock Infinite is the reason why I became a game designer in the first place. So it is a fantastic pick.
Really?
Yeah.
That's the game that made you pursue the games career.
Okay, well,
Can you tell me why?
Let's say it was a last drop in the barrel, okay? So, of course, all the games I played during my childhood, Ratchet & Clank, Tonic Trouble, whatever, all of those games. We'll have a special episode coming up soon where we talk about our top 10, top 5 favorite games of all time. A lot of gems in there. But yeah, Bioshock, when I played Bioshock Infinite together with Witcher, my jaw just dropped. And I always knew I want to reach people with something that I make or that I am part of. And Bioshock Infinite's story, not the gameplay design, let's not talk about the gameplay design, but how they deliver the narrative hit me so hard that, I don't know, I just, in this very moment when I finished the game, I knew that this is the industry that I had to go in.
Did you play the first ones before, like Bioshock 1 and Bioshock 2?
Yeah, I played them when I was sick in high school. I had both of them in my PlayStation, and I played them both in one go. And of course, the mind blow of all mind blows with the "Would you kindly?" It's fucking amazing. But I don't know. And Bioshock Infinite then with the 2 DLCs tying it all together. Damn.
Oh yeah, it's made a really rounded package. I still can remember playing the first Bioshock, and the opening 15 minutes were there was so much impressive and jaw-dropping stuff in there that completely sucked you immediately into this underwater city. It was absolutely insane. I think it's by far, in my view, maybe the best introduction to a game ever. You have this plane crash, and then there you get out of the water, and then there's this huge tower, and it's constantly mysterious and mystery after mystery, and how the whole world is being introduced with the big daddies and the little sisters and the splicers and then all these crazy weird bosses throughout, and then the level design with don't get me started on that. It was just overall
Let's hear it.
Such a fantastic game. The thing is, Bioshock had this compass in the center of the screen, if you remember, right? Because the areas were so dense and close quarters most of the time. But I think I never actually looked at the compass. I never actually needed it because the environments were so distinctive and the areas all while being consistent in this 1940s, 1950s Art Deco style. You have this garden area, then you have the medical pavilion and all the others. It's just so distinctive yet consistent. It was just so cool to be able to navigate through it without even needing that compass.
Did the first 2 Bioshocks already have this button you press that shows you this laser arrow that tells you where to go? Because I remember in Bioshock Infinite just spamming that button to know where I have to go to progress fast.
I think the later games had a different approach to it. I have the first one actually a little bit better in my memory than the other ones, the more recent ones. And in the first one, there was this huge arrow in the middle of the screen on top. You can't miss it, basically, and that was your compass. And I'm not quite sure how the other two games handled it.
I know
But
that
there were certainly improvements, yeah.
I know that Infinite has this key that you hold, like in Dead Space. You hold this key, and then this magically appearing laser or arrow shows you the way. Or I'm completely wrong, and I misremember, and now I'm embarrassing myself. But that's what I remember. I don't know. I love the game. I love the set design. I love it's okay. They also have a lot of cool gameplay tricks, right? I think we talked about it in an episode already, where with the secret, you can't die from the last bullet, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. But it's also, I just love Booker and Elizabeth's dynamic, and this entire. I just love this world. Like, you can dive into it, and I could get lost for forever.
It was also with a deal. Oh wait, is it a spoiler if I say they tied Infinite to the first games?
Let's not.
Okay.
What's the rule on spoilers on our show anyway, Sven?
I mean, the games are old enough, and now we just mentioned that the spoiler will probably be coming now, so might as well skip the next 1 minute if you're not into spoilers.
People will be listening to this podcast when they're on the go. We're not gonna spoiler anything major. Like, we're not gonna spoiler big twists of the newest parts or of the DLCs, because there are many people out there who haven't played the DLCs. But just general talking about the topic and theme should be okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, fair enough. Then let's not get into the story spoiler stuff. And what happens, just wanted to mention that it's a nice way how they tied all the parts together.
Yes.
With the DLCs. Yes.
Guys, please, I mean, the DLCs are not like Witcher DLCs, which are widely regarded as the best DLCs of all time because of how much content they bring. Very similar to, if you remember, Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare. Also a standalone game, which was a DLC, but was an entire 40, 50-hour game. No, they're different. They are short and sweet and brutal, but they tie stuff together. We can't say more, but let's just say they're worth playing. Please, if you enjoy Bioshock, please play the 2 Burial at Sea DLCs for Bioshock Infinite. It's important if you care about the story.
Oh, yes.
That's all we can say.
Yeah, they're also adding some new gameplay elements, so it's not only for the story, I think.
All right, but thank you, Nico, for hitting us up with your favorite game, and I hope you enjoyed your shout out. And if you leave us a funny review, we'll read it on the show. If you send us your favorite game, we'll talk about it, and or not talk about it, depending on. We'll definitely talk about it, even if it's My Little Pony number 5 or whatever.
Then we're for sure going to do a super deep analysis of My Little Pony. If somebody recommends this as their favorite game and sends a proof as an image that he owns the game, I'm totally down for analyzing the game.
Okay, fair enough. All right. I mentioned it in the intro already with a little whisper. We're dropping a special episode soon where we talk. We always drop a special episode every month on Patreon. That is exclusively released there, but it's low. It's not like these episodes. So we talk about current themes. We talk to each other, just whatever's going on. We have specific topics in those episodes. Like we sit down together, analyze our top 10 games, for example, or I don't know, this kind of stuff. So if you wanna listen to the first special episode, head over to Patreon. That's all we want to say. We don't pitch Patreon on the show otherwise, only in the intro for future reference. Yeah. That's the deal. Sven is smiling. He's like,
I'm smiling.
Sweet money.
Raking in the cash, because we're totally only doing it for the money.
No, we don't care about the money. It's why we make all the normal episodes free. It's about fun. The only goal that we have with the podcast monetization wise is that we at some point are able to do 2 episodes or more a week, and that can only be done if we can sustain ourselves with that. That's it. Like, we have no monetary goals otherwise. This is for fun, and this is for educating you and educating us, because we are still the idiots and you are the idiots with us, and we need people to educate themselves with us together so we're not idiots anymore.
And of course, don't forget educating each other.
Yeah, of course.
About their certain specialities. I can nerd about the level design, and you can go on for hours for all the combat stuff.
Yep, that's true. That's last time we recorded an episode. I don't know, was it number 3 or number 2, where you talked about the level design from Call of Duty Warzone, and I did not know anything about this, and I was glued to the screen. I have Sven's beautiful, handsome face open here, and yeah, I'm getting schooled as much as everyone else is. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, and same with our guests, right? In the future. We haven't didn't bring a guest onto the show yet, even though we have a few waiting, because we're not 100% sure yet how we wanna handle the guests. Do we want this to be like an interview that we talk with the guests and ask them and then find out what they're about, or do we want the guest to be part of our hangout? So the guest comes on and we just talk about current topics with them. And if something that is related to their expertise comes up, they can weigh in. We're still figuring that out, and until then, we're gonna hold out on the guests for a little bit. But yeah, just so you know.
But there for sure will be some.
Maybe you can let us know how you would like it, what you would prefer. I mean, if you listen to a podcast like Game Maker's Notebook, they have the guests in an interview style. But also Ted Price is AAA for his entire life. He knows to ask the right questions. So, I don't know. We'll have to see.
For sure, that podcast, to be honest, feels a little bit more prepared, in a sense that it's a more produced show. They have an intro jingle and all of that. And
prepared. Yeah, more like a radio show, you mean? Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, like a scripted-ish radio show. Even though, of course, he asks spontaneous questions, and you can feel that, because you as a good interviewer, of course, you have to ask the spontaneous questions, but there of course are recurring questions in the podcast they hold, where they always ask the already proven AAA developers how they made it in the industry, how they got into the industry, and what kind of advice they would give to aspiring game developers, which is always a nice touch, because you always have like different accounts from different specialities and within the AAA industry, so they all got into it in a different manner, basically.
Yeah, I mean, probably games industry is I think the industry with the most people coming in from different areas. Studying game design as a thing, I don't like 90% of people who are currently in the games industry have probably not studied literal game design or game development at a university. But instead they came in through, I don't know, they've been an audio designer or something for their entire life, and they jumped into games audio design, and for all categories there's something like this.
Was like studying games even a thing like back in 2005 or early 2000s?
Probably not. They're all fairly new. All the study programs that are solely focused on game design or game development in general.
Well, with this study programs, there's always the thing that they are probably in a way, if they're not in a private institution, regulated by some government head or some government organization, and these government organizations take a lot of time to catch up with what is happening in the industry. So everything they normally teach in universities that are tuition free are like 2 or 3 years behind the stuff that is like cutting edge right now. That is the stuff that the current AAA studios are looking for. So you're always a little bit behind if you're going the study route.
Yeah. Also, I mean, depends on what you wanna do in the end. If you are let's say you are a programmer, okay, and you want to be maybe a backend or an engine programmer or a gameplay programmer or anything like that, then the number one concern for you, of course, is being flexible with your languages. So you can C#, C++, blah, 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 all those deals. Because that doesn't matter. The studios have their own language, their own engines anyway, but they are written in the 2 most commonly used languages, so you can interact with the API and with all the parts anyway. So as a programmer, I think you're fine, even if you're in a public university where stuff is behind. You don't need the newest algorithm for AI searching to join a AAA studio. But if you I don't know what do you think, Sven? What would be the best or the most important part to be up to date? The most important role in a studio?
Well, for sure, the technical side that you want to keep up with the latest tech in the terms of machine learning or AI or like advanced rendering techniques for virtual reality. Now that you have 2 screens, you have to render more and optimize it in a better way.
Mhm.
That would probably be the highest priority from a studio perspective. Like that you want these kind of people who are like this technically have sophisticated knowledge in a technical realm, I think.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, a narrative designer, for example, we have to, of course, there's game writers who are literally writing the texts, and there's narrative designers who are more like a director from a classical movie that take care of how the story is delivered to the player. And that knowledge is a little bit timeless. Of course, there's always new things coming out, but I mean, if you look 100 years back, it's still the same way of telling epic sagas or delivering epic stories as it is today. So a narrative designer is probably a little bit removed from all this be up to date cycle of game design.
Sticking more to proven concepts, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it requires a lot of learning for sure, but it doesn't require to be like the newest study program ever made.
Oh yeah, it's a great comparison because like the most writers I know always read books that are from like maybe the 60s, 70s, or even here early 90s. Robert McKee's Story is one of the most recommended books in terms of screenwriting or general writing. And that book is like from the early 90s. So it's around 30 years old. And when you maybe read a book related to technology from 30 years ago, maybe it's a book about Flash and no one uses Flash anymore and stuff like that. So you really, of course, there are like C# or C++ or the old C languages, which are still being used in some parts. But of course, those languages get extended over time. The new stuff gets added to them. So you won't have the newest version in terms of having the programming language knowledge.
Yeah, to the libraries, that's true. And also just languages like Lua that are used mainly for... I personally programmed or coded in Lua when I was doing World of Warcraft add-ons back in my teenage days as well. Oh my god, so many custom add-ons.
What kind of custom add-ons did you make? What's even possible in making add-ons for World of Warcraft that are like allowed? Because I think Blizzard was always a little bit more harsh on that. Or am I completely mistaken here? Because I haven't played as much World of Warcraft like you.
Okay, I've played. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we've talked about that. I played World of Warcraft a lot. We've talked about all the competitive shooters I played, but yeah, I played a lot of World of Warcraft, from heroic first clears of the server to raid leading and everything. And as a kid, I started when Burning Crusade came out, and back then, oh my god, the add-ons that I personally wrote were add-ons that tracked adding overlays so you could watch YouTube while you were playing, because back in the day no one had 2 screens. Okay, so you had to find a way while you were grinding boring quests to somehow bring entertainment into your game. So that was something that I did. And then there were the more sophisticated things that I didn't write personally, but people in the modding scene that are still big today, like the deadly boss mods, or tracking what boss patterns there exist and organizing raid groups from everything. There's mods that do anything in World of Warcraft, so they are pretty open. They only get touchy when you try to replace things from the game, like sounds or official artwork or stuff like this, because then they consider it copyright infringement.
Would you say these plugins or extensions would like be required to have the best possible experiences, or is just personal taste? Because I'm always imagining it, if you need tons of plugins and mods to make the game playable in a sense that you enjoy it enough, doesn't the game itself fail to provide the necessary tools and experience to be fun on its own?
That's a very good point, because I was constantly faced with this problem when I was raid leading from a competitive point of view, because I had people applying and being in the guild who were adamant on not wanting to use deadly boss mods. What does deadly boss mods do? Let's say the boss has a cone attack that shoots a fire from below in a cone pattern. Deadly boss mod will tell you, in 5 seconds there's a cone attack happening, be careful, step out of the cone attack. Then the cone attack indicator comes and it blurs at you, you're currently standing in the cone, walk out of the cone. And then you walk out of the cone and it stops yelling at you. And of course, this is wildly hand-holding, right? I mean, but on the other hand, to be competitively viable, you had to use all of these. Like everyone in the raid group had to have it installed, and you would do deadly boss mouse checks if people have it installed, and if they don't, they cannot raid with us. And at this point, being so that mods become so invasive that they are a requirement to be installed so you can even compete in the competitive level, that kind of raises the eyebrows. That kind of raises the question, is it okay for the developers not to support or bring something into the game like this? Or is it okay that they even allow this? Because it does make the game a lot easier.
It basically, from what I feel, from what you described, it takes away like most of the challenge from adapting yourself and your playstyle to the boss, basically. It's the same if you would have that plugin or feature in Dark Souls and you would always see where the boss would be attacking next, then it becomes really easy. Yeah. So not sure if it's the same game anymore if you overdo it with the plugins.
Yeah, I see that side, but on the other hand, I have experienced how the game feels and how much toxicity there is when people fail repeatedly. And playing in a 40-man group, it's just people will fail with the mods and without, and it's going to get more frustrating if you have to explain every little thing all the time to people, and they will never learn because people don't learn in big groups. Someone fucks up, which is okay, but the more help you can get to make 40 people not stand in shit, the better, right? So I was happy. But on the other hand, if you would be more restrictive with mods, and now comes the real answer to your question, the mod level that is allowed in World of Warcraft is amazing because there's people who play the game and only want to experience the lore. And then you install lore plugins that make every NPC trigger like this window where they're talking to you animated, and you have this huge compendium of quests where you can go through to experience the entire world one by one, and you can do all the quests for the Lore Master title. And that's thousands of hours of gameplay that you have to do. And this wouldn't be possible if
that sounds fascinating.
If modding wasn't so invasive. So
that's a good point. Protecting yourself with mods from unintended experiences. That's just one idea I just had is probably existing. But that you have mods that also like change the names of other players maybe, or even what is going on in the chat, maybe translates it a little bit, something that enhances your roleplay experience a little bit more, so that the people speak a little bit different and there's no one running around with Fridge Master 3000 or something. That completely ruins your immersion in a game like World of Warcraft in my mind.
World of Warcraft has something called roleplay servers, right? RP PvP, RP PvE, normal RP servers. And people on these servers generally have a mod installed or a plugin or a add-on, however you want to call it, installed that tracks a different profile of them in the background. So when you encounter them in world, you see an overlay that describes their character. And then would be, I don't know, this is Derek Flameheart, and his, I don't know, entire backstory is that he, whatever. You know the drift, you've played Dungeons and Dragons, you know how this works. And this is exactly what they are doing with these kind of mods. And they're meeting, and they're not playing the game. They're just using the world to meet and chill like they would in real life if they could in a fantasy setting.
That's something that actually would make me play World of Warcraft, because this thing I mentioned before was one of the things that always kept me from playing MMOs a lot, because of like toxic communities and people who are not actually trying to play within the constraints of the world and always trying to exploit stuff. And we generally make your experience of playing some immersive fantasy role-playing game, they generally try to ruin it a little bit on purpose oftentimes also. So with that, I might as well give it a try at someday, even though probably after 15, it's still going the game. But after 15 years, you always feel like, oh, there's way too much to play now to keep up. And I don't know, they probably have content for about 5,000 hours now, which you can play through after how many expansions? 7, 8, or
something like that, yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
But
crazy.
We don't want to start the whole talking about WoW Vanilla or WoW Classic now, but they did just literally do what you were afraid of. They relaunched World of Warcraft, and there's a new World of... It's weird because they announced WoW Classic, but we all knew it was coming. We all knew at some point it had to happen to relive the game. And what they're doing now, or which is leaked, I mean, it's rumored, it's not confirmed yet, but they're doing questionnaires for players as well, that they want to release expansions into WoW Classic. So that means while the live WoW is going and we're at add-on number 7 or 8 or whatever, there's classic WoW going, which is now reliving the cycle of the old add-ons in their original states, right? They're not altering anything. So there's 2 timelines of World of Warcraft running, and that's cool.
So they're
as hell.
basically selling their community the same game completely again, even with the expansions. Just for nostalgia purpose.
That's what the community wants. That's what everyone thought. Oh yeah, it's just nostalgia. You're gonna drop it anyway after a month. But people are still playing classic like madmen, and it's been out for quite a while.
I mean, I can understand that you want to go back to the old days and play something you remember so dearly, and that maybe hasn't been as streamlined now. I imagine after 7 or 8 expansions, now the game is like other modern titles, very streamlined. Everything feels a little bit more on autopilot. You have multiple UI elements and quest markers and stuff. And back in the day, you had a much bigger focus in games for exploration and stuff and finding it out yourself without a million guides and plugin overlays. And yeah, that reminds me a little bit of why I still like the original German Gothic games so much, because they're not as hand-holding as modern RPGs and modern games, or as streamlined for your perfect experience that you relive, or not relive, but live through the one designed intended experience. And back in the day, it was like less of these intended experiences and a little bit more sandboxy overall.
Original WoW. Okay, a picture just fell from the wall. Whatever. That's
I saw it on the webcam. What the hell?
Little entertainment for everyone. Original World of Warcraft had stories like you know them from Morrowind, where you had to read the actual quest text, right? Where there's no marker, there's nothing. It just tells you like, oh man, I really need that boar skin from 2 mountains to the left and 1 river to the right. Please find that. And then you the player that you are, me back then being a kid, just clicking through everything, and I'm standing there. What the hell do I have to do? What is happening? But it was immersive. And I want to tell myself that this is what I want. And this is what I still want. But I also see myself being annoyed that if I get a game that is still like that, Kingdom Come Deliverance comes to mind, was a little bit like that, very much immersive focused, that I enjoyed, by the way, the game. But on the other hand, sometimes I was annoyed that questing is more work and less enjoyment.
It's more taxing on brain capabilities, I guess, because like when do you game normally? After a day of work and stuff, and then you don't want to read 1,000 miles of text again, 1,000 pages after working a day maybe.
Passionate book readers would disagree, but yes, I agree with you. Yeah, whatever.
Well, if you are a passionate book reader and also like to play these role-playing games, you don't want to read all the time. It's not the thing you want to do all the time, right?
Yeah, 100% true. All right. I mean, we've talked a lot about games I love. What is the game that brought you to become a game designer or game developer, Sven?
Oh, that's actually not a single one. It's a combination of 2, maybe 3. Let's say 3. But I have a clear number 1, which is the original Mafia game by 2K Czech from 2003. And that was the game that gave me the feeling that games could be, in a way, much more than these arcadey Pac-Man experiences I got used to when I was very little. And then I made a super huge jump from playing mostly these arcade learning games and then getting introduced to it by my brother to Mafia, and then reliving this Goodfellas story-esque huge epic open world Mafia story. And I was so crazy immersed in it and was such a big fan of how the story played out. And that gave me the feeling, oh man, I want to do something like that. And I think in the same year, it's also 2003, came Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Outcast Part 2. And that was the one where I got introduced into the classic controls of WASD. And I played all my games as a little child before with the arrow keys and maybe a joystick and stuff like that. And then my brother taught me the classic movement and stuff like that. And oh man, the combat in that game is today my most favorite sword and saber combat I have ever played. Maybe there will at one point come a game that rivals it, but even the newest Jedi Fallen Order can't come close, in my opinion, to the combat and saber design in the Jedi Knight 2. And man, the newest one is super hard. Have you played it?
The Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a Souls-like and tries to be a Souls-like and generally tries to be a mix of everything.
Yeah.
From what works, like the Tomb Raider games, a little bit in there with the wall running and the how do they call that? The shrines, or the place where you can meditate, and then all the enemies respawn when you have regained your health, and that's very Souls-like. And also the tons of boss fights in there, and yeah. But that was one of the games that is like super challenged me recently.
To answer your question, yes, I have played the game. I, as you know, I'm a big Dark Souls fan. Played all the games. Usually play them naked, not my body in real life being naked. No, the Dark Souls character being naked. I love playing no-hit runs. This is the kind of challenge I enjoy. So I enjoyed playing Jedi Fallen Order on the highest difficulty. But I have to say, I uninstalled it after a couple hours because I just... And Nico, who is listening to this episode that we shouted out earlier, who is a huge Star Wars fan, will probably stone me for this. But yeah, I couldn't get fully into it. It just didn't hook me because even though it's doing many things right and doing many things in a very solid and fun, engaging manner, in my opinion, Dark Souls does not live and is this huge thing that it is because of the combat and because of the difficulty. No. In my opinion, Dark Souls is what it is and why I love it so much and why I get lost in it, because of its world building and of its mysterious world that you want to know more of. And how the levels, and now your level design again, how it's structured, that every area is connected to other areas that you can see from old areas. And it's just so mysterious. And this is the spirit that Jedi Fallen Order failed to capture. If they tried to be a Souls-like, I don't know that, but yeah.
Well, touching on the what you mentioned, how the Dark Souls game is structured with the interconnectivity of all the eras, I think that's the thing where Jedi Fallen Order does not deliver on the classic Dark Souls type of game, because you have the separate planets, and the only thing that connects those planets you can visit is your spaceship. So you can't find any shortcuts from that one planet to the other, because obviously it's a different planet, right? So the small areas themselves are much less providing me with the experience to, let's say, explore and find out stuff within the lore, because I mean, in Star Wars generally, that's super protected IP in general. So you won't turn a corner and find something that has not been greenlit by Lucasfilm, basically.
Yeah.
So it's very, very designed, very intended experience, and it's most of the levels don't feel as explorative like in Dark Souls, and much more like a funnel, and much more like the Naughty Dog games, but with a different combat system, of course.
But that's what I mean. You're agreeing with me, and I like that. This is where they failed in capturing. I don't know if they even tried. I don't know if their goal was doing this. I think their goal was making a solid Star Wars game that delivers on not being bad, because the current track record on Star Wars games, recent Star Wars games, is pretty bad. So they needed to show investors, show publishers, show the gaming community that this developer can still be trusted. I mean, it's from Respawn Entertainment, right? So they made Apex, they made Titanfall, they made great games, right? They can be trusted. Hopefully, I'm not wrong. Is it from Respawn, Sven?
It is from Respawn, yeah. And
okay.
The surprising thing is that they basically only made, if you exclude Titanfall 2 single player campaign, which is fantastic, by the way, only like to 80% made multiplayer games, and then Lucasfilm was willing to give them the like epitome of single player adventure games and let them do that. So that's an interesting decision right there.
Yeah, they have opened up their IPs now a little bit. You have to be honest with the Star Wars community. You can buy into the Star Wars community, the Star Wars IP now, as far as I know. All studios can, or many studios can. You can apply to make a Star Wars game now because they want to branch out in what I've had many discussions with fellow Star Wars enthusiasts, which I am not, but many of my friends are, that what's holding me back from Star Wars is that they keep delivering the same storyline. They have this amazing universe with all these aliens and planets and cool shit going on, but they keep delivering the same epic saga just in a different thing. What I want, and that is before Mandalorian and all the other stuff was even a thing, what I always wished for was just give me a noir film set in the Star Wars universe that has nothing to do with the sagas, all the characters from the sagas. Give me an sitcom set in Star Wars that has nothing to. That's just not like let's imagine a sitcom like the ones that you love, like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, set in or Scrubs, set in the Mos Eisley, however it's called in English.
In the cantina.
Yeah, in the cantina. Things like this. I think this would have been the thing. That's what they have to do with Star Wars. They have to open this universe up for all storylines and all different kinds of mediums. And then they will be, like, Star Wars is already a juggernaut. But then they will be, there's no way to remove Star Wars from your life anymore.
I think that's what they're trying to do with the expanded universe, which they retconned after Disney purchased Lucasfilm, and with all the comic books and TV shows and stuff like that. But I completely agree with you on them not being, let's say, ballsy enough to go another route with the saga films, with the main movies, because the main movies were, to be fair, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I liked the first new main movie. The other two weren't as great, in my opinion, even though Episode 8 tried something new, tried to be tonally different, which I like, but the movie didn't matter in the end, because Episode 9, again, retconned everything from the previous movie, and it didn't feel as planned out. And I think you're completely right with saying that this universe holds enough novelty in parts where we haven't been yet. So have you watched the Mandalorian thing? Because even though it's something completely different and without Jedi, at least yet, without Jedi, I heard that they're trying to cast a Jedi in the next season, which I'm not a big fan of, because that's what made the spin-off series a little bit special, that there are not Jedis in there. And even The Mandalorian didn't really stand on its own because it relied too heavily on the Empire being present in there. So you again had this familiar visual clues of having the AT-STs, the Stormtroopers and the TIE Fighters and stuff like this. It feels like this franchise can't get away from the Empire and can't get away from stuff you already know. It's a shame for me because it has this huge ass universe where so many possibilities you could try to go.
Yeah, but it's probably intended, right? They want to keep coherence and they want to keep the factor that when people see this, they know, Star Wars, this is the IP Star Wars. Yes, I know this. I know this from back when I was a kid and I watched the first Star Wars movie or something. But I think you said a good thing there with the ballsiness. Just go ham, man. Just, if you give me a Souls-like Star Wars game, just go crazy. Give me dark, weird fucking monsters on planets that are ripping Ewok-like creatures in half and give me a gruesome, dark, disgusting Star Wars experience. I know it will never happen because Disney owns it, but if you tell me, and this is something that many game companies face, that we face, that everyone faces, that Star Wars Battlefront, the people from DICE faced hard, is managing expectations. And if you just let the Souls-like word slide accidentally in an interview, then immediately every player who will touch this and buy this game expects something from the game. And the same thing happened to me. I touched the game expecting Souls-like, and what I got was Souls-like combat a little bit, and nothing else from the Souls series. And then I was disappointed because I went to the game with different expectations that I should have had.
Yeah, okay, fair point. I see where you're heading with this. By the way, another game I played recently, getting a little bit away from the Fallen Order and Souls-like, was the Hitman game, the newest ones. And I think I haven't seen a game that provides as much of sandbox capabilities in terms of what you can do with the same small objective. Like your objective in each mission in the game, okay, kill this one guy. For any other game, it would like you're mowing down tons of red shirts in the most shooters and most stealth games. Even Splinter Cell, you're killing thousands of people, and then putting so much emphasis on the way of how you go about assassinating this one or two persons you have to do in these huge areas and giving you like the 1,000 tools. And it was so satisfying. I think I spent the whole evening and up until the morning hours to just in this one level and trying to do the assassination with all the different tools I could find. It was like, it felt like the developers was motivating me by planting all the little hints and all the little tools everywhere and conversations you can eavesdrop on, that they wanted me to find out while traversing through I can do this. Okay, next time I'm trying to do this way. And there are so many crazy ideas on how they designed this one little objective that was fascinating to me, what I wanted to share. So a little bit sidetracked, but yeah.
That's not sidetracked. I love our topic exploration. You mentioned something there that is it's very dear to my heart, because last time we talked about, or 2 episodes ago, we talked about how the new Outer Worlds feels and how overwhelming the choices you are presented with feel, because you can do anything. And I was a little bit worried when I encountered the Hitman games franchise for the first time, because if a game advertises themselves as you can do anything to solve the scenario, I always think like, oh man, I don't want to play this. Too many choices. This doesn't feel like an intended experience. But in the Hitman games, as you said, there's this one goal you have in this little tiny area, in this loop, essentially, and you can get to that very understandable goal in different ways. So it's not overwhelming. So Hitman franchise is very cool, even for me who doesn't like super overwhelmingly open choice games.
Okay, that's a fair point. The difference I would see there is that for Outer Worlds, it's a game that is much more focused on its story. So you always feel like when you are within story games provided with so many options, you always have the feeling, or at least I have the feeling, that you are missing 80% of the story because you're not taking this choice.
Yeah.
And with Hitman, if you are playing through a level and have found a successful way, you still have the feeling, okay, yeah, I completed upon the task without having the strong feeling of missing out. You know that there are other ways which are maybe as great enough ways, like the first one you tried. The first one, maybe you are trying to poison somebody. The next one, you push him over the ledge, or the other one going completely crazy using a golf ball, which explodes when the target kicks it and stuff like that. So yeah, I think you should be drawing a line there a little bit, but it's a fair point that you're having this overwhelming amount of choices makes you think twice if you want to invest as much time to see everything.
Yeah. But don't get me wrong. There's a big thing in the games world that I love, and that is exclusive to games that cannot be replicated by movies, and which is the awesomest and the best part about interactive media. And that is player-told stories, right? That is players that are emerging, coming out of the gameplay. And there's a studio that I like, that we talked about Sea of Thieves before, Rare. This is their entire slogan, for example. What they are working with is what their games focus to be are telling a story through gameplay. And of course, they give you a framework, or games give you a framework, right? You get this pirate boat, you get this ocean, you get these islands and game loops and progression loops that you can do. But the real stories happen through playing with your friends, right? Ramming that mega shark, and some other boat is shooting cannons that you're dodging, and you are actually, and this is where gaming transcends and becomes real life as well. When you're walking with your friend to school and there's a car almost running you over, and someone drops their hot dog but catches it before it hits the ground, these are random things that happen in the real world, but you talk about those even years after. Remember that time where we almost died? That kind of shit. And we dodged that car, was so cool, fucking awesome. Same thing happening in these kind of games. If one of these crazy moments happens in a game where you're playing with all your mates in a crew, or even in Counter-Strike, in PUBG, doesn't matter what game, when you pull off something epic that's cool, that's rare, that never happens, you talk about this months, years after. And this is what games can do for you that movies cannot do. And this is amazing.
Which is basically providing a framework for stuff happening in that is not as designed or intended, except for the framework being as designed to let stuff happen, right?
Yeah, okay, then you can go with the philosophical approach through making a framework that allows this option to even happen in the first place. Is it not intended? Yeah. But yeah, that's what I'm going for.
Nice. Yeah, that's what I definitely had the feeling in Hitman, that there's more of a framework and less of a clearly. I mean, it has a story that connects all the levels. There's an overarching thing. You are chasing this ultimate bad guy who's pulling all the strings, and then the individual people you have to assassinate all are part of this crime ring and stuff. They try to connect it, of course, but all these levels were, of course, be able to stand on their own, which, now that I think about it, they even had to, because they released it in an episodic format, like the Life is Strange episodes. And that's a trend a lot of games are going right now. So, yeah, makes sense the way they released it, that the levels should and needed to stand on their own.
Yeah, but from a design perspective, what we talked about just now is called, like, the word that is used if you are a game designer, if you're working in the games world, that is called emergent storytelling. Story that emerges from the game itself and doesn't, isn't super predetermined, gives you a framework. But it's super it's easier to do this in multiplayer, because the players themselves introduce a factor that you're not pre-programming, that you're not making before it happens, that you cannot predict. So automatically there's going to be some emergence there. But if you make a single player game, for example, like the games you mentioned, Sven, it's harder to do emergent storytelling. I mean, there's good examples out there like Dwarf Fortress, where there's crazy shit happening because everything in the games world can interact with each other, and you're essentially just watching a system play with itself. And there's always like the cat walking through puke, and then the hairs are being wet, and then the fire that the cat is walking by goes out, and then the dwarf cannot read his book anymore. And that's something that just randomly happens because all these little things can interact with each other. But if you look at games like Fallout and who are trying to do something like this, it's not nearly as emergent as the other kinds of games are, because there's too many things predetermined.
Yeah, the way you described it really gives off the feeling that in multiplayer games, the protagonist and the stars are really you and your mates. And for single player games, the stars need to be the mechanics. The mechanics need to be the standout thing to tell the story, the tools you are provided with. And in a way, in the multiplayer thing, your friends are the tools that tell the story with you. So if you're in an isolated capacity, of course, this one screwdriver will be your sparring partner in action and not your pirate mate on the ship.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, there's co-op games, right? Who are taking a linear story, but you're living you're experiencing the story with a mate, but there's almost no emergence happening because there's no room, there's no framework for it to happen. There's this, you have this set storyline, and there's this very linear approach that you can take with your mate, even if you have someone with them, because it's not a sandbox. You can barely interact with most co-op games. And even though it's multiplayer, it still does not support this way of storytelling. But yeah, for the wide variety of multiplayer games, that is true. I would agree.
Oh yeah, that point you just made was super frustrating for me when I played A Way Out with my brother from start to finish. And A Way Out is also a game that, like, it's a co-op game, and the cinematic Hollywood story is as a 2-player mode. And that game was also like super designed through and had a lot of QuickTime events. And I'm not a fan of QuickTime events. And QuickTime events always feel like you can't fail them. And in that game, I really try to force the game to let me fail at it. And like, there's this there are multiple sequences where you have to hammer on the button to get the timing right, or open something up, or win a fist fight and stuff like that. And your intensity of smashing the button doesn't even matter in that game as much. And in the beginning, at first it feels like you are having an impact, but later on there are boss fights going on. It doesn't matter what I do. It's basically scripted what happens. There's this no, I'm not getting into spoilers, but there's a climax boss fight at the end. Let's call it boss fight, and you have to damage the boss. And I think no matter if you hit him or not, he still takes the same amount of damage. And that it was felt super obvious to me that this is not me being successful in what I'm doing right now, but the game trying to keep up its pacing, its narrative, its epic moment, its cinematic moment, and not letting the player get in the way of telling the story they wanted to tell, if you know what I mean. Yeah. But for A Way Out, apart from that, it was of course a cool story, and the characters were likable, and it was nice to sit there and let everything happen, even though I didn't feel like there was as much influence I could have had on the story as I wanted to. But yeah, it was enjoyable, but also a little frustrating.
Haven't played it, but I've followed the release, of course. Co-op games I usually play are, because my brother always makes me play survival games with him. So things like The Forest, or to an extent, some of the roguelikes like Risk of Rain, these kind of games, not survival game, I know, but these kind of games where you're still not playing against other players, you're still co-op, but you're not in a traditional co-op sense where you're experiencing a story. It's still about the mechanics, and these kind of games can still be very emergent. Like you can still, the developer never thought this was happening or was ever going to happen, and you experience it even though it wasn't intended to be experienced, and that is cool. If it's not crazy bugs that break the game.
Yeah, we're exactly back at the type of game you mentioned before. Like, that's again that multiplayer game that lets the player write the story or be the star of the story.
Yeah, for sure.
It would be really cool to have something like A Way Out in a VR setting, because, well, then it turns a little bit more into an escape room, of course, because we're like a multiplayer escape room where you also have to work together to solve a problem. But maybe in that way it feels a little bit more interactive, that you have a little bit more, let's say, consequence in what you do and not be pushed through a funnel again. Maybe that's also a result of the type of game I play a lot. These action adventures that have a funnel level design a lot of the time. Because I'm a sucker for stories in linear funnels, yeah. So, yeah, would be cool to see where they can bring the co-op in the future without always telling the same type of stories, you know?
Yeah, what I always wonder in these kind of development processes is, what comes first? Do they sit down and decide that, yeah, okay, level design decides we want our levels to feel this way, and we want this story to later be felt this way and experienced in this way for the players? Or does the ability design come first and say, hey, we have these kind of abilities and we just want to build the game around it, and we don't care in what settings this happens, or the programmers, or in, like, when is this? Because all of these aspects of game development, they're so closely tied together that it's hard to like, of course, you establish a shared understanding. It's the most important thing. Establish a shared understanding in the development process. Get everyone on the same page. Hey, I have this grand idea. I want to make Assassin's Creed. It's a game about assassins that you enter a computer and then you become an assassin and you can get to climb a lot of shit. And we want this to feel very cool and satisfying and mystery and Templar, and you're in this world. And then you start the development process. But what happens first? Like, is the climb mechanic the number one thing, and then they build the climb mechanic, and then they build the levels after the climb mechanic? Or do they build the levels and then think, how can we traverse these levels most efficiently?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that's at first this depends totally on the studio you are at, because I guess a lot of studios make it differently. But from what I've read and heard and like saw in interviews, in videos, and our podcast, people talking about how the game's made to be, most of the time it feels like there was one or two persons in the beginning who had this one idea, then locked themselves in the room for 1 or 2 months, pitched it to their team, and then everyone ran with it. Like, you had this one baseline idea, this one core thing everyone is building on, much like a core vision, like this one central, let's say,
the design pillars. Yeah,
maybe that's even a little bit too far in the design process. Doesn't even have to be the design pillars yet, but just like you said, okay, maybe we have a assassin who gets into the Animus and then relives what happens in the lives of his forefathers. And that's maybe the original concept idea. And there isn't anything in there with like, oh, it's okay, it has to be a game about parkour. It's only happening in a city. It has to be about assassination. It has to have this eagle mechanic or something like that. I think the mechanics always come second, I'd say. Except if you have something in mind like, okay, let's make a Star Wars-esque game like Beat Saber, where you basically build your whole game on the mechanic and not on a story concept or something like that. If the mechanic comes first in Beat Saber, that's the one thing I could imagine where the mechanic came before the actual like world concept.
Yeah, which, by the way, Beat Saber, once you mentioned this lightsaber thing, would have been a perfect example of what I mean. What could have been a Star Wars game, but has nothing to do with Star Wars in the sense that everyone would think. This is the level of abstraction I want. I want the coolness of the Star Wars world, but I want to have nothing to do with Han Solo and all the people related to him and around them and all that kind of stuff that I have heard enough about.
So, yeah. I can imagine that working. But the last time they tried to do a music game in the Star Wars setting, and oh my god, it was for the Kinect. And they really tried to sell the Kinect motion control thing. And it was a game like Just Dance, basically, what Just Dance is. And you had to dance like Han Solo and Lando Calrissian and the Stormtroopers to modern pop songs. And that was a tonal contrast. Jesus Christ, it got memed all over the internet. And that's not what I would want from Star Wars. But I see where you are going here.
I mean, sometimes juxtapositions, right? When you contrast, stark contrasts against each other, like a nice old lady and what she does in reality at night is, I don't know, murder a bunch of people very brutally. And this is a juxtaposition, and this can be very interesting and has happened in a lot of stories and from all forms of entertainment. But yeah, I see where you're coming from. If that does not feel coherent, then it makes no sense to go that far, for sure. And we were talking about earlier what comes first, blah blah, level design. It reminds me, we have talked about Naughty Dog in an episode, and we mentioned that they don't have producers, and apparently they have producers now. So
at least a bunch, 2 or 3, maybe.
Maybe
I don't think they have
2 or 3,
lot.
500 employees, but only 2 producers. What
I mean,
more do you need?
I couldn't find more with my research. I only stumbled upon 2 people on Twitter who had in their bio that said that they are producers at Naughty Dog. So
okay. But at least there's new things happening, developing there, and they are trying if that's true, what you saw, they're trying new approaches to how they've been managing their teams, and that's good. I mean, every company, every studio, games or not, should always strive to optimize process and not overwork employees. And if they try new things to counteract that, that's very good in my book.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's a nice way to end our episode today on a good note. It's a motivating thought.
Yeah, that's true. It is
a great company culture.
Yeah, guys. Yeah, please, guys. Everyone who listens to this, have a great company culture. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just so easy. Go ahead.
Just snap your fingers. Great company culture. Easy peasy. No, doesn't matter if are you a developer? Are you a gamer? We're just sitting at home gaming right now because of the crisis, the pandemic. Or if you're an exec, a studio exec, you're managing a studio. Maybe you have your own studio. It's not easy. We know it's not easy. Everyone knows it's not easy. But as long as I think you honestly and emotional honesty as well, try to make it the best it can be, with even if it sometimes costs a little. Sometimes it adds a few days to your production, a few weeks, months, doesn't matter. It is worth it in the long run. It's worth it to have a place where people want to stay, where they don't stay because they're afraid, because they feel fear. They're afraid that they're going to lose their jobs, they're going to lose their income, they're going to lose their securities. Don't make them stay because they're going to lose all of this. You have to create a healthy and fun atmosphere so people just want to stay. They want to be where you are. And I think this is where you should be aiming at if you are managing a team.
Don't make your employees do the sacrifices. That's always in my head great leadership, that you take the full responsibility and also own up for it when you're in a leadership position, and not let the bad stuff happen to your employees. That would suck. I've never been in a position where that happened, thankfully. All my employment endeavors were fine in that sense. So I guess I'm lucky in that sense. But there are a lot of people out there who maybe feel different and work maybe in a toxic environment. And that's, of course, something that shouldn't be the case, and where people need to raise a little bit awareness.
Okay. I think that's it. That wraps it up. If you have questions, hit us up on all channels: Discord, Instagram @IndustryIdiots, Twitter @IdiotsIndustry. Write us on Discord. Leave us a funny 5-star iTunes review. If it's funny, if it makes us laugh, we'll read it on the podcast. Tell us your favorite game. We'll talk about it like we did with Bioshock this episode. And just generally, thanks for having fun with us, because we really enjoy this. And if we would just do it for ourselves, we would still have fun. But it's much more fun to interact with you guys. So thanks.
And it'll still be our hangout with you guys, and just being best friends. And you guys are also, in a way, our best friends in that sense.
We're all idiots together. Yeah.
We're all idiots in this together.
To get a little bit away from the cheesiness and more yeah, but okay.
Oh, that was the super cheesy outro.
Okay, let's have our traditional bye.
All right. Bye.